Welcome to today's episode of People and Strategy. I'm your host, Mo Fatalbab, President of International Facilitators Organization. People and Strategy is a podcast from the SHRM Executive Network, the premier network of executives in the field of human resources. Each week, we bring you in-depth conversations with the country's top HR executives and thought leaders. For today's conversation, I'm excited to be joined by Bob Goodwin, President of Career Club, where he works with senior executives to elevate leadership, performance, and align business strategy with people outcomes. Welcome, Bob.
Mo, it's so great to be with you. Thanks so much.
Bob, great to be with you. What an opportunity. Bob, let's start with your career journey. Tell us about it and what brought you to the field of executive leadership.
Well, thank you for asking. So my background is in sales and marketing, actually. And I really enjoy that. I love marketing. It's so much fun. But I've also always been a big networker, and I love meeting people and connecting people and stuff like that. And when you're a networker, you end up meeting a lot of people in job search. And so people are like, call Bob. He's nice. He knows a lot of people and he'll help you. And what I discovered very early about job search is that it's really a big sales and marketing exercise. What is your brand? What's your unique value proposition? How do you communicate that? All that stuff. And so in 2021, I started Career Club to really go kind of chase my passion, which was helping people in career transition was the original value proposition, and teaching people how to do that. What I discovered along the way was that many executives who are in seat were struggling with a lot of the same issues that people in job transition were struggling with. Again, what is my unique value proposition? How do I craft a career path? Just getting comfortable talking about themselves, things like that. And so, what it kind of has morphed into is both helping, in a group setting, job seekers, and then, working with organizations, helping their executives become the best version of themselves and making sure that they're carving out and crafting career paths that are meaningful to them.
Well, I love that. And I also love the article you wrote in the summer of 2025 issue of SHRM's Executive Network People and Strategy Journal.
Thank you so much, Mark. That was a great article. It was a lot of fun to write. Thank you.
Yeah. So the title was Speaking the CEO's Language, and it talked about CHRO perception and the core issue with how HR is currently perceived in most boardrooms. And so the question for you is, why does this matter for organizational strategy?
So maybe take just half of a step back is, I work a lot with SHRM. I love SHRM's mission, and helping, the workers and the workplace is really, really important to me. And so, of course, you start to get to know a lot of HR professionals. And I start tracking, what are HR executives and professionals talking about, listening to, things like that, which is where I get to see a lot of your great work, Mo. So again, it's great to, I'm a fanboy too.
We're mutual admiration here.
Yeah. So, but what I started noticing was that there was this real dichotomy between what HR people are talking about in their news feeds, like what they're receiving in their news feeds, and not bad things, but, mental wellness, employee engagement, turnover, retention, whatever the buzzword of the day is on quiet quitting, quiet staying, coffee badging, whatever. And then I looked at 2 years worth of what HR executives were getting in their news feeds and compared that to 2 years of data with what CEOs and CFOs were getting in their news feeds. And maybe not a big surprise, but it was really kind of interesting to see the data, was that they're not talking about the same things. So if we see something like employee engagement, over 2 years, that's showing up 25%-ish of the time in a CHRO's newsfeed, approximately 6% in a CEO or CFO's newsfeed. Conversely, if we look at what's in the CEO's newsfeed, it's going to be things like profitability, cash flow, revenue growth, share price. And how often are those terms showing up in the HR newsfeed? Oh yeah, they're not. And so there's like this big disconnect. Yeah. And so that was kind of part A of what led to this. And then maybe the second piece of it was during COVID, HR had a very prominent, and rightfully so, seat at the table because all hell broke loose. And, just the workplace as we knew it just instantly got turned on its head. And, the HR was very front and center to make sure that, work kept getting done, that all the accommodations were being made, and amazing, important work got done. That was followed by George Floyd and the horror of that. And so, I&D came to the fore, right? And so we saw all this effort and things going on around diversity and inclusion. And so, again, that was very much of an HR led thing. Well, that's kind of come and gone a little bit, right? And we don't have to argue the merits of that, but it's the reality is it's definitely waned. And so, kind of like, well, what's the next thing for HR besides return to office mandates? And so, the reason to be, it's like, how do we continue to reinvent ourselves, right? And not wait for the next crisis to occur, but to be much more proactive in, redefining, just like we do with our executive coaching folks, reestablishing what's our value proposition and how do we most resonate with our core constituent, which in this case is the CEO, the CFO, and the board.
Okay, so it makes sense to me that when you look at the data, the CEOs get different data, different information than CHROs. They have different jobs, they have different responsibilities. Makes sense. But what you're getting at here is, are we speaking the same language? And so, what are some of the linguistic uh, approaches? What do CHROs use in terms of language? If we could dig into that a little deeper, that may be different from what the CEOs are speaking.
Well, it's a great question. And it's going to be a lot, again, of things that your audience, our audience here, and would be used to hearing about in terms of employee engagement, turnover, retention, talent acquisition, things like that, which are all important. And there's an intuitive sense that these are important. But the current environment that we're in right now is very much focused on efficiency, doing more with less.
AI.
AI, by the way, which is obviously one of the key catalysts behind all of this. Yet, if we look at the income statement, the profit and loss statement for a company, right, which shows revenue minus costs equals income, the number one expense line item for virtually every company is compensation and benefits. It's people. So, I mean, we are very much in the middle of the biggest line on the income statement, but not necessarily in the middle of talking about it in a way that resonates with the CEO. So I want to be very clear too about the article that you reference. I claim to have broken no new ground on this. I mean, a lot of these are existing ideas, existing principles being shaped for the current environment that we find ourselves in, and how to make sure that the HR executive is able to approach the CEO, the CFO, again, not just like either trying to get money for their budget or trying to make a qualitative or emotional case because it's the right thing to do, Mo, right? We want to take care of our people, Mo. It's going to make them unhappy, Mo, if we do. They're losing their motivation. I mean, if we look at Andy Jassy at Amazon, Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan, Joe Stanky at AT&T just recently, came out with this memo that it was heard around the world. Like, they're losing their appetite for soft sounding kind of words and things that don't directly tie to the business. Wall Street is unrelenting. Private equity firms are unrelenting, and we need to be able to tap into that. And so I don't know that it's necessarily, in many ways, a reinvention of HR. It's just sharpening the point that why these things actually matter and how they tie to financial outcomes that the CEO, CFO, and board genuinely care about.
And so what you're saying is these things actually have measurable results that'll speak to the language of the CFO and the CEO. And yet, CHROs lean on this type of language instead. Why do you think that is?
I mean, some of it, Mo, is for, I think, really good reasons. I think a lot of people, and ones that I know, like you do, I mean, I know a lot of CHROs at this point, they are good people who
Yeah.
care about people.
Yes.
And people are emotional creatures.
Yes.
We want to think that we're rational, and maybe we are sometimes, but we're also very emotional people. And you talk about, the expression, bring your whole self to work.
Yes.
People do, and it's like, I've got aging parents that's weighing on me. I've got a kid who's off the rails. I maybe have a marriage or significant other relationship that's not going on. I might have a health issue that I haven't disclosed yet, or maybe I have. But like the whole human being, a lot of this is feelings. And it is, mood driven and circumstance driven. And so we talk like a human being, because by the way, we're human resources. And yet, while all of that is true, it doesn't at that level translate into why it matters from a business outcomes perspective. And the article seeks to make that connection a little bit more tightly for folks. So we keep caring about the things that we care about. We just package it a bit differently.
Yeah. And emotions matter, and having CHROs that care matters. But what kind of gap is this creating in terms of the CHRO perception?
Okay, so if I'm speaking very directly, I think in some cases it is an existential crisis for HR. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal very recently that was talking about layoffs, and the number one functional area over the past 2 years that have been affected by layoffs is HR. That starts to make it sound like HR is a luxury, or at least somehow more expendable than other functional areas. And so there's that. We are seeing in some cases where with public companies, they're doing away with the CHR role because, again, if it's this more qualitative, soft, squishy kind of stuff, and a Joe Stanky at AT&T says, hey, this whole family thing, I'm over it. Like, I don't care. This is a business, and that's all I really care about. Then the people who are talking about these squishy things may not feel like they're the most important person in the room at this point. And perhaps I don't need them. And so, again, I don't want to overstate the case, but at the same time, the numbers are what they are, and it doesn't need to be this way. So I do believe that for HR will continue to evolve. You brought up AI. So I think that a lot of people see some low-hanging fruit that if HR is the compliance, policies, procedures folks, well, I can just hop on an app and go, just ask, ChatGPT or our company's version of ChatGPT, what is the, paid time off policy here? Hey, my associate just said something untoward me. Like, how should I respond? Well, the app just told me. And so I don't need all these HR people to go look up, what the policy is for this. I can just put it in people's pockets and they can go look up the answer for themselves. So there's a lot of things that left unattended to, I think, conspire unless we have another fill in the blank, crazy event that happens that all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, we've got to get, HR back in the room. I'm suggesting that HR can be much more proactive in doing this. And again, not in any kind of a negative sense, but in a way that truly adds value to the enterprise. Again, for me, it's mostly an understanding, some business acumen issues, and then just packaging it in a way that the audience, CEO, CFO, is more likely to receive it and respect, understand, and invest in what you're advocating for.
So part of what you talk about in your article in that regard is financial fluency.
Yes.
And being able to speak that language and how that is critical to see that this is not a cost center, but a driver of business outcomes.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah. So just maybe like a couple of examples that I think are accessible to anybody who might be in the audience today. One is do you genuinely understand how your company makes money? So you could be, somebody that just sells coffee cups and like, okay, we have them made here. The cost of goods sold is that we ship them. Our profit margin is pretty straightforward. We sell coffee cups. This is our profit. I understand how that works. But then you've got companies that in multiple countries, they've got multiple divisions, multiple product lines. All right, for the big three, the big five drivers of revenue and profit at your company, do you understand how they make money? Because if you do, you can start to be, again, one, be proactive, two, be more creative, and three, clearly be more effective in developing human capital strategies that help the company make money, which is really the essence of a business. So I think, do you understand? And again, I know this sounds like elementary school, but it's shocking how often, and not just HR, it could be marketing, it could be sales, it could be lots of different functional areas who don't genuinely understand how the company makes money. So, do you know the company's business model? The second one is EBITDA. So, right, so earnings for income taxes, depreciation, and amortization. And so it kind of sounds like MBA lingo, right? But it's basically cash flow. How does this thing, kind of make positive cash flow? Because without cash, there is no business. And for private equity firms in particular, that's their king measure is cash flow. And so that's why they're always trying to squeeze expenses out of the thing to drive EBITDA higher, profitability, cash flow higher, because that becomes the basis for, times 5, times 8, times 10, whatever the multiple is, to create the valuation of the company.
Yes.
Well, so if you don't understand how the private equity firm is evaluating your company's performance, and all they see is ways of whacking expenses versus you being able to say, I get EBITDA, but if we let go of this many people, we can do that. And that's a short-term gain, but potentially with a lot of long-term pain associated that is not in your best interest, PE firm. Let me do the math for you, because if we let go of this many people, that means this much production isn't going to happen. That makes us this more dependent on fewer people. Now our margin for error is lower. And so kind of scenario planning, risk management planning to be able to make the case of, I understand your need. I understand why you have that need. Let me show you potentially a more creative solution to get to what you want. That is a person that's going to be much more effective in a meeting than somebody who's taking orders on, I've got to get rid of 25 people. Okay, let me go figure out who we're going to get rid of.
So, Bob, I want to just capture something you said. Let me do the math for you. Is that maybe a good summary of this entire conversation? Let the CHRO do the math for you so that the CFO and the CEO and the board and the private equity folks can come on board and say, oh, yes, I see the math. You're right. Let's do this.
Yes, and? Yes, and. When you start to understand the math, you start to understand more of the puzzle pieces and how you can rearrange puzzle pieces. So, for example, and Peter Capelli at Wharton, I think you probably know Peter, does a great job of talking about, we will talk about productivity in terms of revenue divided by number of employees equals productivity, so $100,000 per employee. What he's kind of brings to light is, but you've also got agencies on retainer. You've got outsourced or augmented staff in India or Lord knows where, right? Well, actually, that should all be included in the number because those are human beings doing work on your behalf to generate, a certain return. So when you start to understand, like, wait a minute, there's more pieces of the puzzle here. There's more, ingredients in this recipe that we can play with, then it allows you to be more creative, more innovative in solutions. Because again, a lot of times the executive is going to make a very blunt instrument decision, let go 5,000 people. Okay, Mo, we can do that. Let me go explore some other ways that, because your real need is an EBITDA number. Yeah. Am I right?
Yes.
Of course, Bob, that's what we're looking for. Got it. give me a week and let me come back with some options for you. Then it's do the math. And in so many cases, because the numbers, with comp and benefits being such a big number, like little tweaks add up to big numbers very quickly, right? And so, when you can do the math for them, even if they disagree with your math a little bit, or as the kids say, your maths don't math, that it's like, okay, fine. Let's say that I'm wrong by a factor of 50%. Let's take it that it still works. The math still works, and you still hit your desired. It must be at least 10x of the investment that you're asking me for. Because interesting, all the examples I've been giving you so far have been more like in cutting budget, cutting numbers versus making investments in things, and how we're going to hit, whatever the hurdle rate is. Like there's another NBA word, right? Yeah. The CFO's like, hey, if you want me to give you $1, you've got to show me where I make at least $10 for every dollar that you're asking for to be invested in. Okay, well, there's another thing I need to know. What's our hurdle rate? Yeah. So I don't come back with, hey, it makes twice as much money. It's like, dude, I need 10 times as much money, not twice as much money. So, but yes, doing the math for them. But again, the numbers are so big, it doesn't have to be perfect math. It's got to be logical math. And then smart people will figure out the right best option within that. But it just really casts, in many cases, the HR executive in a different light than this nice to have, squishy, kind of role that is not as business minded or hard nosed as maybe some of the rest of the company is.
Yeah. I'm curious what other examples come to mind, Bob, as you've seen in terms of HR having done this well, and what made it so effective.
So an example that's in the article that I think is just great because it shows creativity and it shows a deep understanding of some root causes, which is, again, the easy stuff isn't usually the right stuff. It's just easy. And so an example is with Hilton, the big hotel, Hilton Worldwide. And in 2024, they experienced a reduction of 25% in turnover with their frontline employees. So anybody that's been in hospitality, retail, these are very high turnover industries, sometimes like 400% in a year. So 4 people in one job in 1 year is 400% turnover. Yeah. And so they experienced a 25% reduction in turnover with their frontline employees. So that's everybody from the desk person to somebody who's cleaning a room to doing back-end maintenance, whatever. And what they found was that, one, by offering same-day payment of wages, these are people that are living day-to-day, literally paycheck to paycheck kinds of lives. They tend to not be highly compensated folks. So cash is king. So if they're able to get paid on literally a daily basis and direct deposit, like I can go to the store, I can go put gas in my car, I can do just the most basic human things that need to get done so I can come to work tomorrow. So I can come to work the next day and the next day. And so one of the initiatives was instituting same-day pay. The second thing, which is nice and smart and makes a lot of sense, but then I thought what they did that was also cool that took it much a step further was they also created a journey to manager pathway for people. So like in every business, you've got your high potentials, right? Your hypos, and Mo is a rock star. Like this guy does not the sexiest job right now, but he's got a great attitude, a great smile. He's got a customer service mentality. I can't teach some of that stuff. You just come to the party with some of those attributes. These are people that we need to groom and develop and show people that these aren't dead-end jobs, but this is a job with a future and a path. Another good example is Chipotle with doing college tuition, right? Making burrito bowls isn't like the greatest job all the time, but when I can see that as a step to a college education, well, that all of a sudden becomes very, very motivating for somebody to not quit this, quote, dead-end job, or I'm not getting a ton of satisfaction. Now I have a point and a reason for staying. And again, this would be another measure. Retention matters. So Anyway, those would be like a couple examples.
And I would gather both of those examples in terms of their costs were minimal and relative
Yes.
to the payoff of reducing retention by 25%.
But think about this. If I'm the CFO of Hilton and you're telling me that now I need to institute a program that's going to pay people daily, all right, I like sitting on cash.
Yeah.
Like I make money on my cash.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
And
it's an
so,
investment.
kind of playing the float basically and being able to make the case. But the turnover that we're experiencing, which one, recruiting costs, training costs, getting somebody to be competent at their job costs, all those things, or we don't have enough staff. So we actually got 12 people trying to do 18 people's worth of work. Doesn't get done quite as well, or at least not as quickly as it needs to get done. Like making the business case that I know you love your float, Miss CFO, but you're only making this much in float. If we institute this and reduce our turnover, 25%, you're making, to use our example, 10 times the money that you are making in float. Float is what you're doing. You have nothing else to do with the money.
That's right. So how does a CHRO go about measuring the float in terms of the revenue that comes from it as opposed to paying daily?
Right. So that's where you would, again, I think that collaboration is important. I would be approaching like, I think I understand one of the root causes. We've done the research. What we have learned is that people go because we pay every other week and they're going to jobs that pay weekly. And we've actually done the research that if we were paying daily, they don't want to leave. They actually like working at Hilton. These are employees who are doing really, really good work. But because they're leaving just for a weekly cadence paycheck, what we learned was if they had a daily cadence, like we wouldn't lose any of them. So here's the turnover cost. This is what it's costing us in guest satisfaction scores, right? People not, returning to our hotel or whatever the measure would be. Plus, again, all the training, recruiting costs, lack of quality, et cetera. How much do we make on your objection is that I make money on the float. Can you help me dimensionalize that? And be very honest. It's like if the numbers don't work,
yeah.
I totally get it. I'm not asking you to do something that's like a bad decision for us. I just need to know what the comparison case is. Can you share that with me?
Yeah.
I mean, somebody can say no.
Yeah.
I mean, if they do, I guess you've got the right to say no, but it's like, I'm just trying to help Hilton make more money, have more satisfied guests, and continue to grow the way that we want to grow. I believe this is a place where we can do that in a very meaningful way. Could you share with me what I wouldn't know how to guess the float number per se. I would need to be told that.
Yeah. Great. So in your article, you talk about 5 metrics that every HR leader has to master. We don't have time for all 5 right now, but maybe can you go into a couple of them for us?
Yeah, I mean, one is turnover costs. And again, that sounds simple, and like I'm not trying to come across like I've discovered this new metric that nobody's ever thought of before. But we're coming to the end of the year right now. We're going to be going into Q4 before we turn around good, and maybe there's we lost people in a certain role. We haven't replaced them yet. All of a sudden, that starts to look like a budget save, and we just close that open headcount. Because now I don't have to pay the salaries. And so I'm just going to very neatly take that as a budget save. And it's like, okay, we can do that. That is a viable option, and people do that all the time. However, let's look at what the true cost to the business is by losing that productivity, one. And then 2, we also know from our mental health and like wellness data that sick days or taken short-term sick leave is up because we are leaning on people too hard. And either they're just creating their own breaks and calling that a sick day, or they genuinely need a mental health break. So we're paying for this one way or the other. You may not call it what it is, but that's really how this is playing out. And so I think that turnover, and again, creating a sense of urgency around turnover, because we've got lost productivity, when people leave, particularly when it's, regretted turnover, meaning somebody's leaving that we wish didn't leave,
Mm.
right? So voluntary turnover, particularly of people that we would like to be keeping. All right. Now that work isn't getting done. I can measure that. I can measure the advertising costs to go post this job and socialize it. I can measure the time that it takes because we know that we do 6 interviews, including a panel interview. In total, that's 25 hours of time. Our average rate of pay for the people who participate in recruiting this person is, $150 an hour. Do the math. Then there's the ramp up period. There's the training cost. And we know this person isn't going to be at full speed until at least month 4.
There you go.
Right. And so, okay, well, that's not hard math to do. You just need to know what your numbers are. And kind of, and in the article, we provide, kind of some templates for people to kind of figure out what some of their costs are. But that would be a real one. And I kind of alluded to it a minute ago. Another example would be employee wellness. And, where people are well-intended, but maybe still kind of missing a little bit is, but Bob, we have an EAP program. We've got wellness things. We've got, things to breathing things that people can, tap into and whatever they're doing, which is fine from kind of a symptomatic perspective, but it's not understanding the root causes of what's driving this. I'll use this as an example around layoffs, since that's very much in the news these days. That, one of the things that we're seeing is that the thinning out of middle management, and it's very in vogue right now. They call it the great flattening to, just remove layers. We want to be more efficient. And yet the problem is that middle management often is the glue between strategy and execution. And so as we lose the glue, right, we lose connection between strategy and execution. Second, people often say, and I think it's a accepted truism at this point, people don't quit companies, they quit bosses. Okay. And so I am now left, so thankfully I'm a manager and I didn't get laid off, but now my team went from 12 to 20. Okay. That's a lot. That's a lot more to take on. And so do I have the ability, just literally time-wise, to provide people with the care that they need to be able to be productive and continue to grow? What ends up happening is, like where Microsoft and Meta, are, stack ranking people, what do they call it? Rank and yank. And so then they take the bottom 10%. All we're doing is breeding next year's class of low performers, not because they're bad people, don't want to do a good job, but they're not getting the support they need because there's too big of span of control. So it's kind of helping you. We can put numbers against those things. And in the meantime, we are creating burnout conditions for people.
Yeah.
And it's very different than it was 3 and 4 years ago, right? Where there was more, I say this nicely, coddling of employees. And now it's like, no, like, dude, this is a company, this is work, do your job, and we pay you, you do work, that's the deal, see you later. And yet, back to whole self, people absorb all this stress, and either it's going to come across as loss of productivity, and you can see it in engagement scores and pulse surveys. People will tell you, like, I'm not doing well right now, particularly young people. And so being able to make a case that we can let go of that many people, I just want you to help see the downstream effect of where this goes. And I'm going to put a number against this, and let's see if that justifies the immediate expense save that we believe that we're getting. Is that really in the long-term interest of the business? But again, if you don't know how the company makes money and how they measure what good looks like from an investor perspective, that becomes very challenging. And then you just lay off however many people you were told.
So great stuff, Bob. I want to get to your template to help make the case that this is an investment and not a need. So in your article, you talk about a template to help HR actually make the case. Can you quickly walk us through that, please?
So one is, what's the problem statement? What problem are we seeking to solve here? And it needs to have numbers. So it's not like people are unhappy. Okay, but what does that mean? I know what people are unhappy. What does that mean? We are seeing above trend attrition rates. We're seeing above trend, lack of employee engagement. Like, pick the metrics that matter that you're choosing to solve for. And like, here's what it's costing us today. This is the problem. My proposed initiative, including the investment to solve for this, is X. Okay, fine. Then and the expected return as measured by those metrics that we started off with in the problem statement look like this. Okay, so here's the problem and why it matters. Here's what I'm proposing. Here's how I believe this is going to pay off. Then an implementation plan, show how you're going to roll this out. And again, because the numbers that we're dealing with tend to be pretty chunky, you don't have to get all this done by the end of Friday next week, right? Like, you can have a measured implementation plan to what you're suggesting. That may just be the nature of the project anyway, but show them like, okay, Bob, that's a great idea. Help me understand, how would you actually implement this in the real world? Glad you asked, Mo. Q1, Q2, Q3, and we'll be at full state, and we should be getting the full benefit of this by then. And then lastly, because this is exactly where a CFO for sure is going to go and a CEO probably is going to go, what are the risks associated with what you're recommending, and what are your contingencies? And so again, being proactive, anticipating the objections and even concerns, valid concerns, so that you talked about doing the math for them. I want to do some of the thinking for them and show that I'm not just like trying to do something. I'll just show you the good parts. I haven't even thought of the bad parts, but like, let me talk you through how we've thought about this. Now, I think the most ideal way of doing this is in collaboration with, for example, your finance colleagues, because they do own the numbers, and not just the reporting of the numbers, but the actual achievement of the numbers. And so finding someone, in the company or some ones who have a shared interest in making this a reality, so that you look like you're being collaborative and this isn't just an HR thing. You could have sales come in the room with you. You could have finance come in the room with you. You could have marketing, who all has a shared interest in the better that you're proposing? That looks like teamwork. That looks like collaboration. It also keeps you from any blind spots that you may not have thought of. It also will probably identify some benefits that you hadn't thought of. So anyway, what's the problem? How are we going to solve it? What's the return, implementation? And we've thought about the risk and contingencies, and here's how we would propose to address those.
Great stuff. Bob, what is one takeaway you want HR leaders to remember in their next C-suite meeting?
Understand. Okay, Stephen Covey, seek first to understand, then to be understood. So they are your client. They're your internal customer. What is important to them? How are they seeing what's going on? How are they measuring opportunity and or challenges? And make sure that you are tapped into that. And, Madam CEO, if I understand what you're saying, it's this, that, and the other thing. Do I understand? That's it, Bob. Awesome. Let me go away. Think about that. Come back to you with some creative solutions. So it's being very centric to them and not being so worried about being in pitch mode and sales mode. Listen first. Make sure you understand before you're presenting a solution.
That's better sales than pitch mode, isn't it? It's still sales.
It's effective sales.
Effective sales. I love it. And last question, Bob, what's one piece of advice that has shaped your work or personal life?
Thank you, Mo. So I would suspect a lot of people in the audience might be familiar with a book called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl.
Of course.
And for those who don't know, Viktor Frankl was a psychiatrist, Austrian psychiatrist, Jewish during World War II, and spent 3.5 years in a concentration camp. And I think the survival rate was like 4% from that. He lost his wife, his parents, his siblings. And what he came out of that with is everything can be taken away from a person except this final freedom, the freedom to choose your attitude and your actions. And so it's all about autonomy and agency and not being a victim, but I've got the ability to always choose my attitude and my actions. I can give it to somebody else and be a victim. It's not my fault. It's the economy. It's my boss. It's my wife. It's my genes. But I can always take it back. I can always take it back and reassert my autonomy. So that just really sticks with me, Mo, that I've got, even when things feel like they're going out of control and just all the craziness, I always get to choose my attitude. I always get to choose my actions.
I just recently did an interview and somebody told me they read that book every year.
I do too.
And I'll tell you, what a great book. It's a reminder, and I need to read it again because it's been about 20 years. Bob, thank you so much. And that's where we'll end it for this episode of People and Strategy. Again, a huge thanks to Bob for your valuable insights. Thanks for tuning in. You could follow the People and Strategy podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Also, podcast reviews have a real impact on podcast visibility. So if you enjoyed today's episode, leave a review to help others find the show. Finally, you could find all our episodes on our website at shrm.org/podcasts. And while you're there, sign up for our weekly newsletter. Thanks for joining us and have a great day.
SHRM.